For these 6 billionaires, their vast fortunes couldn't buy them the one thing money can't purchase: safety from the darkness. But in their final moments, surrounded by luxury and power, something went horribly wrong. These are the stories of the world's richest people who died under circumstances that money couldn't prevent. It was December 15th, 2017, and the winter wind howled through the bare trees surrounding the Sherman family's $5.5 million mansion in Toronto's exclusive North York neighborhood. The 12,000-square-foot home sat quietly on Old Colony Road, its Georgian architecture and manicured grounds reflecting the understated wealth of Canada's pharmaceutical power couple. Inside, the house remained eerily silent as snow began to accumulate on the circular driveway. Barry Sherman had spent decades building Apotex into a generic drug empire that made him one of Canada's richest men, with a personal fortune exceeding $3 billion. At 75, the pharmaceutical mogul remained actively involved in running his company, known for his relentless work ethic and fierce determination to provide affordable medications worldwide. His wife, Honey, 70, had become beloved in Toronto's social circles for her extensive charity work and warm personality. The couple's philanthropy had touched countless lives across Canada, with donations exceeding $50 million to hospitals, universities, and Jewish causes. Despite their immense wealth, the Shermans lived relatively modest lives, often seen walking their dog through the neighborhood or driving ordinary cars. Their 4 children, Jonathan, Lauren, Alexandra, and Kaylin, had grown up understanding the value of hard work and giving back. Recent months had brought increasing stress as legal battles with Barry's cousin Carrie Winter intensified. Winter had filed a $1 billion lawsuit claiming Barry had cheated him out of his rightful share of the family pharmaceutical business decades earlier. The bitter family feud had consumed considerable time and energy, with depositions disrupting Barry's normally structured routine. They were last seen alive on December 13th, after which there was complete silence from the normally active household. Something went catastrophically wrong in the Sherman household. The couple's normal activities were interrupted by events that would transform their quiet mansion into the scene of one of Canada's most puzzling crimes. The house's security system showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared stolen from their valuable art collection. A realtor conducting a scheduled midday tour made the horrific discovery that would shock Canada's business community. Both Barry and Honey Sherman were found seated by their indoor pool, fully clothed with belts wrapped around their necks and tied to a metal railing in an upright position. The bizarre staging immediately raised questions about what had occurred. Honey showed facial bruising that suggested a struggle, while Barry displayed no obvious signs of injury, creating a puzzling contrast investigators struggled to explain. The couple's positioning appeared deliberate, as if someone had carefully arranged their bodies to send a specific message. Blood smears and drag marks suggested the bodies had been moved after death. Police initially classified the deaths as suspicious, while forensic experts processed the scene. 6 weeks later, after extensive analysis, police officially ruled the deaths a double homicide caused by ligature neck compression. The Sherman children immediately hired private investigators and offered a $35 million reward, the largest in Canadian history, for information leading to arrests. A second autopsy revealed previously missed wrist marks on both victims, suggesting they had been restrained before death. Despite hundreds of interviews and searches, no arrests have ever been made. The case remains one of Canada's most puzzling, unsolved murders. It was May 6, 2014, and the Mediterranean sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of l'Arche Hospital in Nice, France. The modern medical facility bustled with evening activity as visitors and staff moved between the main building and the adjacent parking structure. The smell of sea salt from the nearby Côte d'Azur mixed with the antiseptic scent that seemed to follow people leaving the hospital's sterile corridors. Hélène Pasteur adjusted her simple handbag as she prepared to leave the hospital after another visit with her son Gildo, who was recovering from a stroke. At 77, the Monaco real estate heiress controlled a property empire worth over $20 billion. making her second only to the royal family in Monaco's exclusive real estate market. Her grandfather Jean-Baptiste Pasteur had moved to Monaco from Italy in 1880, building a real estate empire that included prestigious properties like La Bahia and Emily Palace. Despite her immense wealth, Hélène preferred to live quietly, often walking her dog and driving around in a converted London taxi that had become her trademark vehicle. She managed important properties and earned millions in rent each year, but avoided the spotlight that typically followed Monaco's ultra-wealthy residents. Her two children, Sylvia from her first marriage and Gildo from her second marriage, had grown up understanding both privilege and responsibility. Hélène's daughter Sylvia had been living with her longtime partner Wojciech Janowski for several years, bringing the Polish businessman into the family's inner circle. Janowski was well known in Monaco as the honorary Polish consul, who ran a nanotech business and supported various charities. He received up to $500,000 monthly from Hélène's fortune to support his various business ventures, though most enterprises had been failing despite the substantial financial backing. Unknown to the family, Janowski had been lying about his credentials, including faking a Cambridge degree and accumulating massive debts while maintaining an expensive lifestyle. His businesses were failing, and even the generous monthly allowance wasn't enough to cover his mounting financial obligations. He had begun to view Hélène's longevity as an obstacle to gaining full control of the family's vast wealth, which exceeded $10 billion. The evening of May 6th unfolded with tragic precision as Hélène completed her hospital visit and prepared to return home to Monaco. Her driver, Mohamed Darouich, had been waiting patiently in the parking lot, having served the family faithfully for years. As Hélène and Mohamed approached their dark Lancia Voyager van around 7 p.m., a masked gunman emerged from behind a parked car and moved toward them with deadly purpose. The attacker carried a sawed-off shotgun and appeared to know exactly where to find his targets, suggesting careful surveillance and planning had preceded the assault. The shooting was quick and professional, with the gunman firing multiple shots at close range without saying a word, before immediately fleeing to a waiting getaway car. Both Hélène and Mohamed were struck by the shotgun blasts, their bodies crumpling to the asphalt as other visitors screamed and sought cover behind nearby vehicles. Hospital security and medical staff rushed to the scene within minutes, providing immediate emergency care before transporting both victims back into the facility they had just left. Mohamed died on May 11th from his severe injuries. Hélène briefly regained consciousness 5 days after the shooting and told police she was scared and had more information to share, but she died on May 21st from her injuries. Police quickly identified the shooters through DNA evidence, phone records, and security footage. The investigation revealed that Janowski had orchestrated the murder through his personal trainer, who brought in his brother-in-law to contact the actual killers. The total payment for the assassination was $250,000. Janowski initially confessed to masterminding the plot, but later recanted his confession. In 2018, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the assassination. It was December 3, 1999, and the lights of Monaco's harbor twinkled like diamonds against the Mediterranean darkness as Edmond Safra settled into his fortress-like penthouse for another evening of isolation. The luxury apartment occupied the top floors of a building designed specifically for his security needs, with steel-reinforced walls, multiple escape routes, and military-grade surveillance systems that monitored every approach. The smell of expensive cigars lingered in the air, mixing with the antiseptic scent of medical equipment required for his round-the-clock care. Safra had built one of the world's most powerful private banking empires, accumulating a $2.5 billion fortune through his global network of exclusive financial institutions. Born on August 6, 1932, in Beirut, Lebanon, his family was part of the Sephardic Jewish community with roots in Aleppo, Syria. His father, Jacob Safra, had founded J.E. Safra Bank in 1920, and Edmond joined the business at a young age, making $40 million through gold trading by age 16. At 67, Parkinson's disease had made him completely dependent on trusted medical staff who managed his medications and provided constant care his deteriorating health required. His extreme paranoia about security had transformed his Monaco penthouse into an impregnable fortress that isolated him from normal social contact, making him vulnerable to those closest to him. Ted Maher, a former U.S. Green Beret, had been hired as a nurse just weeks earlier to join Safra's medical team. Despite his military background and medical training, Maher felt overlooked by other staff members who had worked for Safra for years and enjoyed his complete trust. The isolation of the job and pressure of caring for such a wealthy and demanding patient had begun to affect Maher's judgment. Safra's daily routine had become rigidly structured around his medical needs and security protocols. Every visitor was thoroughly screened, every delivery inspected, and every movement within the penthouse monitored by sophisticated surveillance systems. The very measures designed to protect him had created a prison-like environment where he depended entirely on his small circle of trusted caregivers. Maher decided to stage a heroic rescue that would demonstrate his value to Safra and elevate his status among the medical staff. The scheme seemed simple: create a small, controllable emergency and then save the day through his military training and quick thinking. On the evening of December 3rd, Maher deliberately set a small fire in a wastebasket, planning to quickly extinguish it after raising the alarm and demonstrating his heroic capabilities. The fire spread much faster than anticipated due to the apartment's materials and ventilation system, quickly growing beyond his ability to control. The smoke and flames triggered Safra's deepest fears about security breaches, causing him and nurse Vivian Torrenti to barricade themselves in the bathroom while believing they were under attack by intruders. Unusually, Safra had no bodyguards on site that night, leaving him completely dependent on his medical staff for protection. The steel-reinforced security walls that were meant to protect Safra now trapped him as firefighters struggled to break through the fortified structure. Both Safra and Torrenti died from smoke inhalation, while firefighters desperately tried to reach them through the impenetrable security barriers designed to keep danger out. Initial investigations focused on external attackers, but Maher's inconsistent story quickly fell apart under scrutiny. He was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison for the botched heroic scheme. Most of Safra's vast fortune was donated to charitable causes through foundations established before his death. It was January 5, 2009, and the German countryside lay buried under a blanket of snow as temperatures plummeted to 5 degrees Fahrenheit around the quiet town of Blaubeuren. The railway embankment stretched through the frozen landscape like a steel lifeline, its tracks disappearing into the darkness as evening approached. The bitter cold had driven most residents indoors, leaving the rural area deserted except for the occasional passing train that broke the winter silence. Adolf Merkel pulled his Volkswagen Golf to a stop near the railway crossing, his breath visible in the frigid air as he sat behind the wheel contemplating the ruins of his business empire. At 74, the industrial tycoon had built a massive conglomerate, including Heidelberg Cement, Ratio Farm Pharmaceuticals, and Phoenix Pharmahandel, that generated $35 billion in annual revenue and employed over 100,000 people worldwide. Born on March 18, 1934 in Dresden, Merkel had fled the Sudetenland with his family during World War II and settled in Blaubeuren. He studied law but left that path early, taking over a small family pharmaceutical company with just 80 employees in 1967. By 1973, he had founded Ratiopharm, Germany's first generic drug maker, and continued building his empire through strategic acquisitions. Forbes had ranked him as the 94th richest person in the world, with a personal fortune of $9.2 billion. But the 2008 financial crisis had devastated his investments and threatened everything he had spent decades building. His companies had lost over 75% of their stock value as global markets crashed, with banks demanding repayment of massive loans he had personally guaranteed. Merkel's most catastrophic mistake had been a disastrous bet against Volkswagen stock, expecting the price to fall during the market turmoil. Instead, when Porsche announced it owned far more Volkswagen shares than expected in October 2008, It triggered a short squeeze that sent the stock price surging from around $210 to over $1,000 in just 2 days. The loss cost him personally about $500 million, one of the biggest individual losses in German financial history. On January 4th, just 1 day before his death, he had secured a $400 million loan, but the deal meant giving up control of his major companies. On the evening of January 5th, Merkel told his wife Ruth he was going to the office to work on potential solutions to their financial crisis. Instead, he drove through the snowy countryside to a quiet railway embankment about 2 miles from his home, parking his modest Volkswagen Golf near the tracks where freight trains regularly passed. Despite the heavy snow and bitter cold that made every step treacherous, Merkel climbed the embankment slope and walked toward the active train tracks. The isolation of the location ensured that his final moments would be private, away from the media attention and public scrutiny that had made his recent life unbearable. A passing train crew noticed something unusual on the tracks ahead and immediately applied emergency brakes, but the massive freight train's momentum made stopping impossible. A second train was dispatched to investigate the scene, where crew members discovered Merkel's body and immediately contacted emergency services. His body was found on the tracks with a note left in his car containing just 2 words: "I'm sorry." The simple message conveyed the depth of his despair and sense of responsibility for the financial disaster that had destroyed his business empire. Merkel's family released a statement explaining that the financial pressure and sense of helplessness had overwhelmed him. His suicide shocked Germany's business community and highlighted the personal toll that the financial crisis had taken on executives. It was July 3, 2018, and the morning sun cast golden light across the stone buildings of Bonlieu, a picturesque village perched on a hilltop in southern France's Provence region. The medieval settlement attracted tourists from around the world who came to admire its scenic views and ancient architecture. Chinese tourists had become increasingly common visitors, drawn by the area's natural beauty and historic charm. Wang Jian stepped out of his tour bus with his travel companion, adjusting his camera as he surveyed the breathtaking panorama that stretched across the Luberon Valley. At 57, the co-founder and chairman of HNA Group had built one of China's most powerful business empires, transforming a small regional airline into a global conglomerate worth $230 billion, with over 400,000 employees worldwide. His personal 15% stake in the company had made him worth $1.7 billion. HNA Group owned major assets across the globe, including Hilton Hotels, stakes in Deutsche Bank, and numerous other prestigious properties that had made Wang one of China's most influential businessmen. He had co-founded the company alongside Chen Feng, with Wang handling most of the internal operations, while Chen served as the public face of their rapidly expanding enterprise. The company had been under intense pressure from Chinese regulators to reduce its massive $95 billion debt load, accumulated through years of ambitious international acquisitions. Beijing had begun pushing companies like HNA to cut back on risky overseas spending, forcing Wang to sell off major assets and restructure the company's financial obligations. Wang had recently sent internal emails to employees claiming that HNA was being targeted by unknown forces working against China's interests, though he never elaborated on these cryptic warnings. The messages had created concern among staff members who wondered about the true nature of the pressures facing their company. The group of Chinese tourists had arrived in Bonlieu that morning as part of a carefully planned itinerary. Wang and his travel companion decided to explore the village's upper area, where the ancient church provided spectacular views over the surrounding countryside and the dense cedrus forest. As they approached the stone wall near the village's upper church, Wang was struck by the magnificent vista that unfolded before them. The medieval wall had become a popular spot for tourists to capture photographs of the stunning landscape below. The drop from the wall to the rocky terrain was approximately 49 feet. Wang climbed onto the narrow stone wall, asking his companion to take his picture against the backdrop of the forest and valley below. Witnesses later said he may have moved too quickly while positioning himself for the photograph. or simply lost his balance on the narrow stone ledge that had been worn smooth by centuries of weather. The fall happened in an instant, with Wang tumbling from the wall onto the rocky terrain below with tremendous force. The impact caused severe traumatic injuries that were immediately apparent to the horrified witnesses who rushed to help. His travel companion frantically called for emergency assistance, while other tourists attempted to provide first aid. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but Wang's injuries from the 49-foot fall proved unsurvivable despite their best efforts. He was pronounced dead at the scene, his body having absorbed the full impact of the fall onto the unforgiving stone and earth below. Chinese social media initially buzzed with discussion about Wang's death, but the topic mysteriously disappeared from trending lists within hours. Posts about the incident were systematically removed from Chinese platforms, adding to public speculation about the circumstances. HNA's stock prices plummeted as investors feared for the company's future without Wang's leadership. It was September 14, 2017, and the early autumn morning mist hung over the rolling hills of Connecticut's exclusive countryside, where Victoria Blackwood's 200-acre estate sprawled across some of the state's most valuable real estate. The Georgian mansion sat at the center of meticulously maintained grounds, its windows reflecting the golden light of dawn as household staff began their daily routines. Inside the grand library, leather-bound books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, creating an atmosphere of scholarly elegance. Victoria had inherited a pharmaceutical fortune worth $4.2 billion after her father's company developed breakthrough cancer treatments that revolutionized oncology care worldwide. At 52, she had spent years managing the complex business empire while struggling with personal demons that had consumed increasing amounts of her time and energy. Her reclusive lifestyle had become more pronounced following a devastating car accident years earlier that had left her dependent on prescription painkillers for chronic pain management. The pharmaceutical heiress had become increasingly isolated from her family members, who had staged multiple interventions attempting to address her growing addiction to prescription opioids. Despite their efforts and access to the best medical care money could buy, Victoria continued to abuse painkillers while trying to maintain her responsibilities as head of the family business empire. Recent months had brought additional pressure as her company faced mounting lawsuits alleging its role in contributing to America's opioid crisis. Congressional hearings were scheduled to examine the pharmaceutical industry's marketing practices, with Victoria's company expected to face intense scrutiny. The irony of her personal struggles with the very products that had made her family wealthy was not lost on those who knew her situation. Victoria had been living alone on her vast estate with only household staff for company, having alienated most family members through her erratic behavior and refusal to seek comprehensive treatment. The isolation had created a dangerous environment where her drug use could escalate without natural checks. The morning of September 14th began like countless others, with Victoria retreating to her favorite sanctuary, the mansion's library, where she often spent hours reading and managing business correspondence. The housekeeper had grown accustomed to finding her there during morning rounds, usually surrounded by books and papers that reflected her continued engagement with the family business. During the routine morning check, the housekeeper discovered Victoria unresponsive in her leather reading chair, her body positioned as if she had simply fallen asleep while reading. Empty prescription bottles were scattered around her chair, along with a half-finished glass of wine that suggested she had been attempting to self-medicate her chronic pain and emotional distress. Paramedics arrived within minutes of the emergency call, but were unable to revive Victoria despite aggressive resuscitation attempts that continued for over 30 minutes. The scene showed no signs of struggle or forced entry, and security cameras revealed no unusual activity during the night or early morning hours. A handwritten note was found nearby, but its contents were never publicly disclosed by investigators, adding to the mystery surrounding her final hours. The note's existence suggested that Victoria may have been aware of the dangerous path she was following. The autopsy revealed a lethal combination of prescription opioids and alcohol in her system, leading officials to rule it an accidental overdose. However, the timing of her death just weeks before major congressional hearings about her company's role in the opioid epidemic raised questions among family members who hired private investigators. The pharmaceutical company faced renewed scrutiny and eventually paid billions in settlements related to opioid litigation, with Victoria's death becoming a symbol of the personal toll of the crisis her family's business had helped create. Thanks for watching. Just when you think you've heard the most heartbreaking billionaire tragedies, we're just getting started. Click the next video for the next stories that will show how unlimited wealth creates unsolved mysteries.